War, famine, man-made disasters. History is littered with disturbing images of horrific events caught on camera. These unsettling pictures feature moments frozen in time, moments before, during, and after disaster. From the haunting images of the Great Chicago Fire to the horrifying human zoos of the 20th century. Join us for the 25 unsettling pictures from history you weren't meant to see. Number 25. Locked Up. Back in 1901, something straight out of a horror movie happened in Poitiers, France. It all started with an anonymous tip-off to the French authorities, claiming that a woman was being held captive in an aristocrat's house. They didn't waste any time and sent officers to check it out. When those officers reached the attic of the house, they couldn't believe their eyes. They found a woman who looked like a skeleton. She was lying on a nasty straw mattress. The woman's name was Blanche Monnier. The place she was found was crawling with bugs, and rotting food was scattered all around. The smell was so awful that the officers could hardly stay there. This photograph offers a glimpse into the nightmarish world that confronted the officers. But the real shocker was that Blanche had been stuck in that hellhole for 25 years, and her own mother was the one keeping her captive. It's a story that reminds us just how cruel people can be, but also how strong the will to survive can be. Number 24. The Human Doll. Take a look at this strange photo. It might look like a bizarre plastic doll, but the truth is far more disturbing. Meet Anatoly Moskvin, a former Russian journalist and college professor who had a bizarre hobby as well as a horrifying obsession. Moskvin fancied himself a necropolist due to his deep knowledge of cemeteries. His hobby involved collecting dolls, but these weren't ordinary toys. He dug up the bodies of the deceased and transformed them into lifelike dolls. Yes, you heard that right. He made dolls out of corpses. But here is where it gets truly unsettling. Moskvin didn't just keep these dolls as macabre decorations. He considered them his companions and even referred to them as his lovers. He wrote about kissing one of these dolls, which was crafted from the remains of an 11-year-old girl. In 2011, the police finally caught up with Moskvin after years of suspicion surrounding a growing number of desecrated graves in his hometown of Nizhny Novgorod. When they entered his home, they discovered 26 life-sized, mummified corpses scattered throughout. It's a story that is as shocking as it is unsettling. Number 23. Prized Trophies. A long time ago, well before European colonizers set foot in New Zealand, the Maori people, the indigenous folks, had this rather unsettling practice. They used to preserve the heads of their people who had died. These heads, known as mokomokai, went through a gruesome process. They were chopped off, boiled, smoked, sun-dried, and dunked in shark oil. After this, they were proudly displayed or paraded around during sacred ceremonies. Fast forward to the 1840s when the British came to town. They didn't waste any time helping themselves to the mokomokai. In this eerie old picture, you can see a man named Major General Horatio Gordon Robley taking a pose with some of these heads. He served in the British Army during the New Zealand Land Wars in the 1860s. Now, this guy had a peculiar fascination with the Maori culture, especially those heads. He ended up nabbing at least 35 of them for his own collection. Number 22. Children for Sale. This haunting photograph, taken in 1948, exposes the devastating impact of poverty on a family's life. Back then, Mr. and Mrs. Ray Chalifoux, a struggling couple and the parents of the children you see in the photos, were in a tight spot. They were on the verge of getting kicked out of their apartment and desperately needed cash. So what did they do? Well, it's pretty shocking. Ray, who was an unemployed coal truck driver, and his wife decided to sell their own kids. Now, there's been some talk in the Chalifoux family about whether this whole thing was staged, like maybe the mom got paid for the picture. But here's the grim truth. All those kids you see in the photo were actually sold to different families within just 2 years. The children, whose names were Lana, Ray, Milton, and Sue Ellen, all between the ages of 2 and 6, ended up in different homes. The mother was pregnant at the time she sold her kids, and sadly, she ended up selling the unborn baby too. Once separated from their parents, these children suffered unspeakable abuse at the hands of their new families. Number 21. Possessed by the Devil. Meet Annalisa Michel, a young woman whose life took a terrifying and tragic turn in Germany during the late 1960s. Initially, she was just an ordinary Catholic teenager living with her parents. But then, something inexplicable happened. Annalisa began experiencing disturbing blackouts at school, which marked the onset of a series of increasingly bizarre behaviors. She convulsed regularly, saw hallucinations, engaged in unthinkable acts like consuming spiders, and even resorted to drinking her own urine. To make matters worse, she heard tormenting voices condemning her to damnation and witnessed terrifying, devilish apparitions. Her mental state deteriorated. Soon, her parents reached the same grim conclusion that she was possessed by the devil. Desperate for a solution, they subjected her to 67 exorcisms, none of which alleviated her condition. Tragically, Annalisa succumbed to malnutrition at the age of 23 in 1976. Her body weighed only a mere 68 pounds. Her story was so profoundly disturbing that it served as the inspiration for the chilling 2005 horror film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Number 20. The Horrifying Human Zoo. We take a trip to the dark part of history many from the West would love to sweep under the carpet. Of the many atrocities committed against people of color in the Dark Ages, the human zoos that were popular in the early 20th century was particularly horrifying. A proof of the extent to which human depravity can stoop, these human zoos featured Black and Asian people, cruelly exhibited as primitive and savage natives to teeming crowds of American tourists. The Human Zoo at Coney Island in New York was particularly famous for its abundance in exotic primitive humans. This unsettling picture shows native Filipinos sitting in a circle at the zoo, surrounded by tourists gawking and jeering at them from behind barriers. Even more unsettling is this picture of a little Filipino girl sitting on a wooden bench, surrounded by a curious American crowd during another horrifying exhibit in 1906. These images serve as a reminder of the cruel and inhuman treatment of people of color throughout history. The echoes of these images can be heard even today, at a time in history when the menace of systematic racism continues to damage our society. Number 19. The Great Chicago Fire. In 1871, the city of Chicago experienced one of the worst disasters in the history of mankind. What started as a small fire in a barn in the southwest part of the city transformed into a blazing inferno, causing a catastrophic level of destruction. Although it only burned for less than 2 days before it was put out by rain, the Great Chicago Fire blazed through an area 4 miles long and 8 miles wide, destroying everything in its wake. Over 17,500 buildings became dust, leaving more than a third of the population without a roof over their heads. This haunting image depicts the terrifying sights that traumatized many who witnessed the horrible event. It also stands as a testament to the destructive nature of fire and other natural forces. Number 18. Shadows of Hiroshima. The historic bombing of Hiroshima towards the end of the Second World War was a pivotal point in human history. A cataclysmic event which turned a once thriving city into a pile of rubble and ash, burned down to the very ground by one of the most devilish inventions made by man, the atomic bombs. The morning of August 6, 1965 started just like any normal day in war-torn Hiroshima, a buzzing city in Japan. For the over 300,000 inhabitants of Hiroshima, everything was normal. That was until hour zero, when a United States bomber aircraft dropped the Little Boy, a uranium gun-type atomic bomb that literally leveled the city. In just minutes, almost the entire city was left desolate. The bodies of those closest to the site of explosion vaporized, leaving only the ghostly shadows. One of the most striking images to ever come out of Hiroshima after the attack features the shadow of a man who was sitting innocently on the staircase at the entrance of the Sumitomo Bank when the blast happened. This haunting image stands as a depiction of the annihilating power of nuclear technology and a testament to the gruesome nature of war. As we look at these images, let us remind ourselves that humanity comes first, and our differences must never push us to repeat our inexcusable mistakes of the past. Number 17. Standing Proud. When photographer Douglas Martin captured this image of 15-year-old Dorothy Counts in 1957, he knew, as did everyone around then, that life would never be the same in the United States. This young black girl walks proudly, making history as the first black student to enroll in Harry Harding High School, North Carolina, which had just been desegregated. This historic moment, frozen in time, marked a crucial point in the recognition of people of color as equal members of the society. Dorothy Counts walked, proud like her father taught her to, unafraid and unashamed, even though she was surrounded by numerous white students and parents hurling the most disgusting racial slurs at her. She walked on, clearing the path for many like her, unmoved by the hate which surrounded her. The calm demeanor of the brave young lady contrasted with the sheer outrage and abhorrence displayed by the rest of the crowd behind her, paints an unsettling picture. It reminds us that our rich history is tainted with racial abuse, injustice, and inequality, especially to people of color. On the other side, this powerful image stands as a testament to the enduring ability of the black race, who are known for always forging a path, even in the worst of circumstances. Number 16. Till Death Do Us Part. We travel back in time to one of the darkest periods in human history. The Holocaust of the Jews offers some of the most bone-chilling accounts of human cruelty in modern history. One unsettling picture that captures the scale and enormity of the brutality shows a United States soldier inspecting thousands of gold wedding rings. These wedding bands form a part of the treasures recovered at the Heilbronn salt mines on May 3, 1945, after Allied forces defeated Nazi Germany. Nazi soldiers were known to forcibly take any form of valuables from the Jewish prisoners in concentration camps before they were killed. These loots included gold teeth, rings, jewelries, money, suitcases, and anything of value. Every ring in this unsettling image represents a broken home and a life snuffed out untimely. These images remind us of the brutal savagery that man is capable of and serves as a monumental piece, highlighting a very dark period in our history. Number 15. Terrors of the Blitz. The sky over London went dark on September 7, 1940, as countless German bombers bombarded the city with the biggest air raid it had ever seen since the beginning of the First World War. Over 430 innocent lives were violently snuffed out that day, and the blasts left nearly 2,000 severely injured. But the horror was not yet over. For the next 57 consecutive days, London experienced what came to be known as the worst man-made calamity to ever hit the city. This senseless display of military prowess came to be known as the London Blitz and carried on in London, along with other major cities in Britain until 1943. A staggering 43,500 civilians were reported to have been killed during the aerial attacks. The disturbing images that emerged from these terrible times are nothing short of horrifying. Buildings flattened as if stomped upon by a mighty giant. An eerie sense of fear and trepidation filled the minds of those who dared to venture outside in those days. One striking image that stands out perfectly contrasted in this gallery of disturbing depictions shows young boys huddled together in a bomb shelter playing a card game. The serenity of the moment, coupled with the unexplainable joy on the faces of these young-ins, stands as a stark contrast to the death and devastation that continued to ravage the world over ground. This image stands as a testament to the enduring spirit of the human race and our amazing ability to create happiness even in the worst of situations. These boys have lost their homes, some of them their entire families, but in this moment, they were happy, and that was all that mattered. Number 14. The devastation of the Black Wall Street. Smoke clouds billowed over the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, on a terrible night in 1921, as alleged white supremacists burned down this once thriving community to the ground. Popularly known as Black Wall Street, owing to its reputation as the most prosperous African-American community in the United States at the time, the Greenwood district was a safe haven for African-American, who were trying to find their footing in a white-dominated capitalist economy. The unprecedented success of this district and its inhabitants did not sit well with many people at the time. Their anger and intense rage found expression after an uninvestigated rape charge was brought against Dick Rowland, a member of the community, who was accused of attempting to sexually assault Sarah Page, a white woman. Haunting images from those dark days show the level of chaos and mayhem wrought by the hate-infested mob who bombarded the city, looting and burning, killing and maiming. These scenes of horror and utter devastation form a sidetracked portion of history, and they remind us of a terrible time when reason took the backseat and senseless violence reigned supreme. The voices of over 300 people killed during the riots echo today, even as racism continues to be a major problem in the United States. Number 13, crashing the Boston Marathon. Today we remember Roberta Bobby Gibb, a pathfinder and absolute legend in the world of sports, known for being the first woman to run and complete the Boston Marathon. This iconic image shows Gibb surrounded by male runners and officials who were attempting to stop her from competing in the race. In 1966, Bobby Gibb had applied to run the Boston Marathon, but the race was still considered an all-men's race at the time, and her application was rejected. Unmoved by the attempts of the officials to sideline her, she decided to run the marathon anyway. On April 19, 1966, Gibb made history as the first woman to run the Boston Marathon, breaking all barriers and challenging the stereotype that women were not physiologically capable of running such long-distance races. Number 12, Leo the Lion. The MGM logo is one of the most famous brand representations in history. We've all seen it, a lion roaring as the opening scenes of some of our favorite movies rolled onto the screens. However, did you know that the first MGM logos were shot with real lions? This unsettling image captures Leo, one of the iconic lions of the MGM brand, as he poses in front of the camera like a trained actor, ready to deliver his lines. Although other lions have been used for the part in the past, Leo was actually the first MGM lion to roar, creating the iconic sound that still evokes nostalgic excitement till today. The grim image of the apex predator standing just feet away from the camera crew, who could easily become an afternoon snack if the animalistic instincts of the lion kicked in, made this picture very unsettling. However, Leo and other lions who were used for shooting the MGM logo were circus animals, who were trained not to attack humans, so they were basically harmless to the crew. This image captures the extent of human imagination and the level of dedication put into the creation of some of the earliest cinematic masterpieces when technology hadn't evolved to the level that it is today. Number 11. Smiling to the Gallows. There is rarely any photo from World War I as iconic as the images depicting the last moments of Lipa Radic, a 17-year-old Yugoslav rebel. The brave young lady, who was just 15 years old when the Nazis attacked Yugoslavia, joined the Yugoslav partisans in the fight to repel Nazi occupation on her native land of Yugoslavia. Between 1941 and 1943, Lipa Radic had become a force to reckon with, along with her father, Svetor Radic, and two uncles, Vodja Radic and Vladeta Radic, due to their involvement with the rebel movement. In February 1943, Radic was captured while attempting to rescue over 150 women and children seeking to escape the Nazi occupation. During her execution, as the Nazi soldiers questioned her concerning the whereabouts of her collaborators, she offered these chilling last words: "You will know them when they come to avenge me." Number 10. The iceberg that sank the Titanic. Over 100 years ago, the unsinkable ocean liner known as the Titanic met an unfortunate fate after striking a large iceberg in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The story of this crash of a century has been a major talking point for the past century, immortalized by the Hollywood rendering of the horrifying accident. However, the main villain of the story, the iceberg that sank the Titanic, has been hidden from the spotlight. The image you see now is possibly the only known photographs taken of this iceberg. The streak of red paint on the impact point, starkly contrasting the white color of the iceberg, and the serenity of the ocean after witnessing such a horrifying event, paints an unsettling picture. It stands as evidence of the devastating power of nature and the great risks associated with technological innovations. Number 9. Dust Bowl. The apocalyptic image you're looking at may seem like something out of a Hollywood blockbuster, but this is a real photo taken during one of the most devastating events in the history of the United States. Extensive drought, low rainfall, and poor farming practices in 1930 created the monstrous wind pollution that engulfed the Great Plains of the United States, extending to southeastern Colorado, Kansas, parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. This black blizzard, known as the Dust Bowl, lasted for a staggering 10 years, enveloping the affected areas in a thick cloud of dust and smoke. This unsettling image depicts the damaging effects of unhealthy agricultural practices, overcultivation, and industrial air pollution on our planet. As we look back upon these dark times, we are reminded of the looming dangers on our dear Earth and the necessary steps we need to take in order to avoid such occurrences in the near future. Number 8. Fire on Marlboro Street. On July 22, 1976, Stanley Foreman, a photographer who worked with the Boston Fire Department, arrived on the scene of an apartment building fire on Marlboro Street, Boston. Unknown to him, the scenes he was about to capture would literally shake the world. As the firemen tried to battle the blazing inferno, they were faced with another Herculean task. 19-year-old Diana Bryant was stuck on the fire escape of the apartment building along with her 2-year-old niece, Tiare Jones. Due to the intense heat of the fire, the two were literally leaning on the edge of the fire escape. As firefighters tried to rescue the two from the dire situation, the most tragic things happened. The fire escape collapsed. These series of jarring images taken by Foreman captured the intense moment as Bryant and Jones fell fast to the ground. Tragically, 19-year-old Diana Bryant sustained multiple head and body injuries and was pronounced dead just hours later. However, there is a silver lining to this story. 2-year-old Tiare Jones was able to survive the incident, as her fall was cushioned by Bryant's body. These images quickly spread like wildfire, prompting new building regulations and fire safety laws in order to avoid the recurrence of such a tragic event. Number 7. The Man Who Fell from Space. A rushed spacecraft, a hesitant cosmonaut, and a government with a selfish ambition. That's a perfect recipe for disaster. This is the chilling image of the last remains of Vladimir Komarov, the Soviet cosmonaut who became the first man to fly into outer space more than once and the first man to die on a mission to space. His death was an avoidable tragedy, orchestrated by an overambitious government whose desires to stay on top of the space race overshadowed the value for human life. The mission was simple. 2 Soviet spacecraft would fly into space, where they would perform a dramatic orbital docking, allowing the cosmonauts to move between ships. Unfortunately, Soyuz 1, the spacecraft carrying Vladimir Komarov, was not fully ready by the time it was launched. The government knew this. The space agency knew this. Vladimir knew this too, but he had no choice. It was either him or his personal friend, Yuri Gagarin. You might know him as the first man in space. Unfortunately, several malfunctions caused the spacecraft to plummet down to the Earth, tragically ending the life of this brilliant cosmonaut. As part of his last wishes, Vladimir Komarov requested an open casket funeral in order to show his government what they had done to him. Today, this image reminds us of this unsung hero of the space race and serves as a testament to the dangerous aspect of human ambition. Number 6. Let the people see what I've seen. These were the words on the mouth of Mamie Till, the mother of Emmett Till, as she identified the unrecognizable remains of her dear son, a black teenager who was lynched to death in Mississippi in August 1955. The chilling image of Till's lifeless body sparked so much outrage, forcing the world to begin to recognize the brutality of racism in America. Till was a black teenager who was visiting his relatives in Mississippi when he stopped by Bryant's grocery and meat market. According to reports, he was said to have met Carolyn Bryant, the wife of the owner of the establishment. Many people claim that Emmett Till flirted or whistled at Carolyn Bryant, which angered her husband and his family. 4 days after this encounter, Roy Bryant, the husband, along with his half-brother, J.W. Milan, assaulted Till at the house of his great-uncle, who he was visiting. They beat him to a pulp, shot him, and tied him up with barbed wire. Afterwards, they hung a heavy weight around his neck before dumping his lifeless body into the Tallahatchie River. Unfortunately, due to the extreme prejudice of the justice system at the time, the men were tried by an all-white jury, who pronounced them not guilty. Upon the insistence of his mother, Till was buried in an open casket, and images of his remains circulated around the country, sparking protests and igniting the fire of the human rights movement. Today we remember him, and we say his name, Emmett Till, even as many people of color continue to experience untold horrors at the hands of white supremacists throughout the United States. Now it's time for today's subscribers pick. Throughout history, there have been several accounts of the use of children and other vulnerable civilians as human shields in times of war. This despicable act, which has recently been observed in Russia's attack on Ukraine, should be largely condemned by every sane member of the society. Join us as we say no to maltreatment of children in conflict zones and refugee camps around the world and their unjustifiable exposure to dangerous situations. Drop a comment to show your support. Number 5. Bloody Saturday. Children are often the most affected in times of conflict. But few images in history have been able to capture the horror faced by children in conflict as the Bloody Saturday. The Bloody Saturday is an image of a Chinese baby sitting and crying in the ruins of Shanghai South Railway Station, which had just been destroyed by Japanese bombers on August 28, 1937, during the Battle of Shanghai. The photograph was taken just minutes after the blast that claimed countless lives in a barbaric display of military power. The gory image also showed the lifeless body of the baby's mother lying nearby. This intense moment frozen in time depicts the instant loss of innocence, the devastating effects of war, and the far-reaching consequences of armed conflicts. Number 4. The Munich Massacre. The Olympic Games of 1972 was meant to be a fresh start for Germany. It was 30 years after the Holocaust, and the German organizers hoped to create a light atmosphere, promoting the Olympics as the cheerful games. But there was no cheer in the air on the morning of September 5, 1972, 10 days after the event had begun. 8 men belonging to the Palestine armed group, Black September, made their way into the Olympic Village in Munich. Armed with Kalashnikov rifles and grenades, they headed for the apartment housing the Israeli athletes, killing 2 of the athletes and taking 9 hostages. Their demands were simple: an unconditional release of 236 Palestinians in Israeli custody. Images of the horrifying scenario circulated globally, as over 900 million people stayed glued to their television screen, watching in horror as the terrorist attack unfolded. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. Due to a mistake by the authorities, all 9 hostages, along with the terrorists, lost their lives that day. One striking image from the horrific event features one of the terrorists, masking his face, standing outside the balcony of the building where the hostages were held. As we solemnly ponder on this image, we are reminded of the dangers of extremism and the constant threat that terrorism poses to the fragile serenity that exists in our world. Number 3. Little Syrian Boy. Millions of children have fallen victim to the war in Syria, their stories untold, and their memories long forgotten. But Alan Kurdi, a 3-year-old Syrian boy, found a voice that echoed the pain of millions like him to the world. This is his story. On September 15, while trying to flee the horrors of the war, Alan, along with his mother Rihanna and his older brother Galib, hopped onto an inflatable boat on a beach in Bodrum, Turkey, and set sail for Greece. Their plan was to make their way to Canada, where they hoped to join their relatives in a safer clime. Unfortunately, minutes into their voyage, the boat capsized, ending the life of the desperate mother and her 2 sons. When photographer Nilüfer Demir saw Alan's lifeless body on the beach, his heart broke. And so did the heart of many who saw the haunting image, which quickly spread online, inciting worldwide protests against military actions in Syria. The graphic image showed Alan's lifeless body, washed up on a beach, as if in a sleeping position, depicting the gruesome effects of war on children. Although Alan might be one of many countless children who became casualties of war in Syria, he is not just a Syrian boy, he is more than a number. He was a son, a bright star, a fighter, an innocent child caught up in an unfortunate situation. So today we remember him, and we say his name, Alan Kurdi. Even as the world battles with several armed conflicts, which continues to expose millions of children around the world to undeserved danger. Number 2. The Burning Monk. In June 1963, Malcolm Brown took this extraordinary photograph while covering a protest organized by Buddhist monks. on the unfair treatment they endured at the hands of the Vietnamese president Ngo Dinh Diem. As he arrived at the scene, Brown watched in horror as two monks doused Thich Quang Duc, another elderly monk, with gasoline. Unsure of what to do next, Brown began to take pictures of the horrifying scene in front of him. The unsettling images of Quang Duc's immolation attracted international attention. So much so that President Kennedy, while commenting on the picture, stated that no news picture in history has generated so much emotion around the world. Quang Duc's act of martyrdom eventually caused the United States to pull off its initial plan to interfere with a coup planned for later that year. This disturbing image signifies the desperation of many to call for peace at all costs, and the far-reaching consequences of the maltreatment of certain members of the society. Number 1. The Little Girl and the Vulture. We round up our historic tour with one of the most controversial photographs in the history of journalism. In March 1993, while working in Sudan, photojournalist Kevin Carter captured this disturbing image that ultimately led to his death, just a couple of months later. The unsettling photograph features a skinny little girl who had collapsed on her way to the food shelter. From a short distance, a vulture waited, patiently anticipating the end of the little girl's life so it could feast on her fragile body. This image sparked so much outrage, with many questionings why Carter couldn't do more to help the girl than take pictures. Many others took Carter's side, defending him that there was very little he could do to help the girl, besides spread awareness on the situation of the conflict-ridden country. In reality, there was very little Carter could do, and his photograph took the story of the girl around the world, attracting international attention to the situation in Sudan. According to Carter, who chased the bird away after taking the picture, the little girl eventually got up and made her way to the food shelter, although her fate afterwards remains unknown. The dramatic scenes Kevin Carter had witnessed in the war-ridden region took a huge toll on his mental health, and on July 27, 1994, he took his own life. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.